So next up, I would like to, and I cannot say his last name. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. Nick Nick G is up. Give it up. Give it up. How do you say your last name?
It's pronounced goldblish, like goldfish.
Goldblish. Okay. I would not be able to say that. Okay. No slides. No slides. I know, right?
Hi, everybody. How you doing? My name is Nick Goldblish. A little bit about me. By day, I'm an HR executive. By night, I podcast, and I have a wife, 2 kids, 2 cars, a dog. And the last time I cried, I watched the live-action version of Beauty and the Beast, which was brutal. Brutal. So brutal. So the one thing what's up? Okay, good. We'll talk about that later. All right. What I really wanted to talk about, and when I had the opportunity, is authenticity. Okay. When I was a kid, I was into art in school, and I remember specifically being in a class around Halloween where the teacher went up and made these scary cats. So she had like a template of what this cat looked like and put it on the board. It had small eyes, the tail and everything. And I noticed every student always felt really comfortable doing exactly what the teacher wanted. Right? It was real easy to do exactly what the teacher wanted. Some variations, but it was basically the same thing. But even back when I was like 12, 13, I hated doing things like everybody else because there was nothing special about it. Nothing special about it. So I was the one who put really big eyes on it. I put a surfboard on his back, and it stuck out. But it took me a long time to get really comfortable knowing that it's okay to be different. It's okay to do something different. Everybody wanted to be the same. Then fast forward when I was in college, right? Late 90s, grunge is really big. Everyone really wanted to play a lot of covers. And I was in a band that only played originals. And a lot of people would come up to me and say, how come you can't play music that we know? And I said, because we want to play music that we like and we feel is the best way to express ourselves. And between those two things, it started teaching me that the best way to be creative is to do something authentic and different than everybody else. So fast forward, 2.5 years ago, I started a podcast in 2015 because I was hitting a midlife crisis. I was having a tough time making friends, and I wanted to find an excuse to meet people. So I learned when I started my podcast, I could tell you when I was here a year ago, it's impossible not to compare yourself to other podcasters. It was so overwhelming last year to listen to the way they podcast, what they podcast, and you start getting in this rut of saying, well, if I'm going to be as big as them or as popular as them, shouldn't I do it the same way they do, right? Am I going to be popular if I lose that authenticity and try to be like someone else? So as I started doing my podcast, I found myself, as much as I started doing things on my own and doing things creative, I found myself fearing, like especially when you start. You start your podcast, you put it out there, suddenly people listen. You're like, holy crap, people actually care about what I'm trying to do. And suddenly you pick a fan base, and suddenly your downloads maybe dip, and you think, well, wait, I might be doing something too different. Let me listen to that podcast of that guy that I know everyone listens to, and let me shape it the way he does. But you start losing yourself. So I was thinking the best thing. I went back and listened to all my shows and tried to think, when did I feel the most authentic? And I try to capture at least 5 things that you can do if there's any new podcasters in the room that you find yourself catching yourself in that rut, or if you're looking to reinvent yourself. 5 things that you can do to give your audience a more authentic self that would allow you to be freer, to be a little bit more creative and try new things on your show, rather than sticking to the absolute norm that you're accustomed to. Does that make sense, everybody? All right, real quick, because I'm waiting for that thing to go up that say I have. My wife says I talk really fast, so she says, you're going to talk forever. I said, nope, I'm not. So number 1, the best way I think to really be authentic on your show and to your audience is screw it up every time. You should purposefully screw up every time. The only way you can learn truly who you are and be authentic in your creative work is make mistakes. Try something new and push yourself out of your comfort zone, so you're going to purposefully make mistakes. Because if you don't, you will do the same thing over and over and over again and do nothing different and nothing compelling for your audience to listen to you. Okay? All my shows I do are very, very different because I'm always trying to do something new. And the cool thing is my audience notices and they tell me, which is really cool. They don't get bored. The second one, all right, halfway through it. The second one is just post it. How many times do you do a show and you're like, that's garbage? That's garbage. Just post it. I have over 100 shows on iTunes, and trust me, some of them suck. But the reason why I put them up there is so I can look back and go either, one, I've really improved what I've done, or wow, I actually was better than I thought I was. Just post it. Now, don't get me wrong, that show I remember my first show just had this sound the whole time. Don't do that. Don't post that show. But if there's an interruption or something that throws you off, post it anyway. The cool thing is it also tells your audience that you're imperfect. You know, I'll be honest with you, I'm nervous up here, right? I'm insecure at times on my show. I'm happy, I'm sad. I want people to know that. I want people to know that I'm different. And it allows them to see a different side of me, which makes me feel more free to create a little bit more, to give them something different every time. Number three, make it different the next time. A friend of mine, Dana Buckler, who hosts this podcast called How Was This Movie? Awesome podcaster out of Ocala, Florida. Called me one day and said, Nick, I'm thinking of doing a different podcast. I'm a little bit afraid. What should I do? And I said, hell yeah, you got to do something different. He was so afraid to do something different that he's afraid he'd scare his audience. But the one thing unique and authentic about the show is him. It's his personality that came out. And I knew whatever he would do, the audience would still get what they've grown accustomed to get, but they're just going to get a different version of it. And he just did he never has people on his show like a co-host, but he had his first co-host, one of the best shows I've ever heard him do. Because the cool thing about it is because he did something different, you were able to hear a different side, an authentic side of him that you didn't if he's more rote. And again, he talks about movies. He talks about why a movie exists, but that can get boring after a while. But he just, by tweaking it and doing something different that one time, allowed me as his audience to hear a little bit something different and be a little bit more compelled about what he was creating. The fourth one, some people are probably, my wife used to hate that I used to do this, interrupt people. Like, we have dialogue. Conversations are imperfect, like wickedly imperfect. People interrupt. If someone says something and you disagree, again, some people might be totally against what I'm saying, ask them, stop them and say why or why not. Why did you say that? Why do you believe that? It really takes your audience on a different path. Number one, it exposes them to a side of you that they might not already know that, again, makes you more compelling and more creative. But the fact that it creates dynamism, and people like conflict. They don't want to hear just this and this and this and this. Some of my best shows go completely wrong, completely wrong. I stop and say that. Now, mind you, when I first started my show, I interrupted everybody because I thought I had to get everything done right away. But seriously, if you're having a conversation with somebody, don't be afraid to interrupt them. Stop them politely. Excuse me, let me ask, can you clarify that? Or I disagree with that. And then lastly, listen in yourself. When I started podcasting, again, I had shows out and people were listening. Suddenly when the downloads drop, my ego kicks in, my perfectionism kicks in, and I'm like, crap. All right, I know these 10 people listen. Let me ask them what they think. Stupidest thing I ever did. Now, one thing is I listen to myself more than they do. So I know what I'm doing wrong. But I needed outsiders who followed my show to tell me what I was doing wrong. And it was brutal because they're like, oh, I'll tell you what I think. All this stuff. And all I really should have done, because you touch your craft so much and you know who you are and your authentic self, I think it's important that you need to figure out those voices in your head. It's okay to listen to them because most likely they're the right voices. Although some schools of thought say you should never listen to the voices in the back of your head. But sometimes they're your best asset when you're in a position where you think you need to change something or do something to be either be more authentic or more creative. And lastly, I'm just going to read this because I probably have, like 10 seconds? All right. Through the power of normal conversation, just normal conversation, being who you are with other people who want to be who they are, you become your most authentic self, and you'll create content that expresses your purest and most attractive identity to your audience. Your audience wants to hear your flaws. They want to know that you're like them, not impervious to the outside world or celebrity. I find that it's really, really compelling to connect with people outside of your podcast and your audience if you just be you. So be the best you. And thank you, Joe, for giving me an opportunity to rifle through that. Did I did it? 8 minutes?